So I bet you're wondering why Breath of the Wild 2 is trending on social media platforms like Twitter. Well, that's because Nintendo just confirmed the dates for their E3 Nintendo Direct for 2021. Taking place on the 15th of June at 9 AM Pacific or noon Eastern, this Direct is said to feature 40 minutes of information focused on Nintendo Switch software that is mostly releasing in 2021, followed by a 3-hour-long Nintendo Treehouse showcase of some of those titles. That leaves us with a lot of questions as to what could actually be at E3 this year, and now what's going to come out this year versus what will come out next year. So let's see if we can't make a few educated guesses and prediction on how this is going to go down for E3 of 2021. Now, if you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you know that E3 week is one of my favorites of the entire year. Ever since I was a kid, I followed this event and dreamed of going, and later as an adult, I was actually lucky enough to attend it twice thanks to the Nintendo Brand Ambassador program I used to be a part of. So I'm excited to see what they're going to showcase in the next 2 weeks, and I'm fairly confident we'll see some sort of update on the sequel to Breath of the Wild. However, let's break this announcement tweet down because, while I understand this is exciting, I do have some concerns. So firstly, it says it's going to focus on Nintendo Switch software, not hardware. Now, I'm not saying this deconfirms a Switch Pro by any means because they could just be keeping it a secret for now, but if Nintendo was going to reveal a new Switch model, especially one with an upgrade in hardware, E3 just seems like the perfect place to do it. I know more Switch Pro leaks have come forward recently, but with no official confirmation, it's still just a guessing game as to what this hypothetical new Nintendo Switch will bring to the table. The only other option would be for Nintendo to announce it before E3 as like a standalone video or trailer, but that just doesn't seem like a smart idea since they always seem to announce consoles or important revisions of consoles at larger events or during their own standalone directs. So unfortunately, I don't think we'll see a Switch Pro, at least not at E3. More importantly though, I want to point out that the original tweet says it'll focus on Nintendo Switch software that is mostly releasing in 2021. To me, that's key in keeping our expectations in check for this Direct. I, like many others, would love to have the sequel to Breath of the Wild or Metroid Prime 4 by the end of the year, but I'm not so sure that's what's going to happen. Now don't get me wrong, I do think those titles will make an appearance at E3 this year. So what do you say we go over the best and worst case scenarios for those games in particular? The best case scenario for Zelda is we get like a full trailer that gives us a little more detail of the story, followed by a short video that overviews the new changes this game brings to the table. Maybe we'll get a taste of Link's new powers with that weird arm thing we saw from the first trailer, maybe a new look at like how dungeons work or some sort of visual improvement, something that'll show us how much they've improved the game and its engine over the past 2 or 3 years. Of course, along with that, we'll get the official title of the game as well. And since the Direct itself is only 40 minutes, this section would probably only take up like 2 to 4 minutes itself, but more gameplay would be showcased during the Treehouse livestream. Then we'd get the official release date for later at the end of this year, maybe near the holidays, so like mid-November to early December. That would be the best case scenario that I could see happening. Worst case scenario, the game isn't shown at all. However, I am pretty confident we will at least see this game this E3, so with that in mind, we'd still likely get some sort of trailer giving us a little more information on the story, while also showcasing some cool gameplay moments, but that's probably about it. At the end of the trailer, we might get a vague 2022 release date, and then the Direct would move on without really missing a beat. Although I understand this would be really anticlimactic after how long it's been since we've heard anything about the game, it's also somewhat realistic and understandable given the state of the world that we've been living in, so I do hope we get more than just that at this E3, but if we do, I guess I can sort of understand it. I imagine we'll also be seeing something from Skyward Sword HD since it literally releases the day after this Nintendo Direct, so I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo just like tossed in a brief trailer just to remind everyone about it or something. I don't think they'll spend too much time on Skyward Sword unless they pair it with some other big Zelda news because it is releasing so soon and it's just a port, so there really isn't much else they could say that we don't already know. I honestly think Nintendo is planning to use Skyward Sword HD as some sort of filler game, just to give the Zelda fans something to do while they work on the sequel to Breath of the Wild for the rest of 2021 and get it ready for an early 2022 release, but I could be wrong, and honestly I kinda hope I am, but I guess we'll have to wait and see in the next 2 weeks. Next up, let's talk about Metroid Prime 4. I know Metroid is one of Nintendo's more niche properties. It has a cult following, but much like F-Zero or some other GameCube titles, it never really caught the eye of the mainstream. However, Nintendo has a good success taking these more obscure titles and placing them on consoles with massive appeal to gain more popularity with them. Pikmin and even Animal Crossing to some extent are great examples of games that weren't as popular on the GameCube but exploded once they were on a different platform. Metroid, despite being on the Wii, hasn't really had that. Even with Prime 3 and the Prime trilogy, it didn't boost the game's sales so much, so Nintendo has a lot to prove with Prime 4 on the Switch, and I think they can pull it off. So for Prime 4, I think our best case scenario is we get some sort of cinematic type trailer, so maybe like a brief overview of the story, and then a lot of gameplay showing off the cool new things that Samus can do in this game, followed by the official title, or I guess in this case, subtitle, since we know it's going to be Metroid Prime 4 something. Then afterwards, we get a release date for probably again November or December of this year. I think this one is pretty unlikely though, just because we've heard Metroid Prime has had a struggled development cycle, so I think we're still, at the very least, another year away from this one being released, but I do think it would be a neat surprise if they manage to somehow get the game back on track for a release later this year. Worst case scenario is we get the official title and maybe like a verbal description with some screenshots or a few gameplay clips. It's really hard to say if this game will even be trailer ready by this E3 since its development has had to be basically restarted from the ground up, so I'm not really sure what to expect when it comes to Prime 4, but I do hope we see it there this E3. Alright, so now that we got the two biggest questions out of the way, what else can we predict that will be at E3 this year? Well, for one, I think it's safe to assume we'll get one or two more Smash announcements. There's only 2 slots left in the second Challenger Pack, and E3 would be the perfect spot to just drop both of them back to back. As to who those characters will be, I've got no idea. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge Smash guy, so I don't really keep up with the rumors and leaks, and since I'm more of a casual player anyways, I'll be happy just to have more characters regardless of whoever they choose to put in. On top of that, I also think we'll probably see Pikmin 4. According to Miyamoto, it's been in development for a while now, so much so that Pikmin 4 has sort of become a meme as like this legendary thing that doesn't exist. But if it does exist, I think it will be shown off at E3 this year. Pikmin has grown in popularity a lot thanks to Pikmin 3 and Pikmin 3 Deluxe being on the Wii U and Switch respectively, and it sold extremely well, so Pikmin 4 could very well be at this year's showing, and if I had to guess, it would definitely be a contender for something releasing later this year. But those are just the titles that we know exist and are being worked on, and that leaves a ton of time for Nintendo to announce other projects. Obviously, I'd love to see more first-party titles that aren't ports or remasters of older games. I understand the Wii U and its software sold poorly, but it'd be nice if we got some brand new titles on the Switch since it seems like there's been a lot of ports recently. Maybe even toss in N64 games to Nintendo Switch Online similar to the NES and SNES games. I believe there's also a rumored Donkey Kong game in the works, and I think Monolith Soft is working on a new Switch game as well. Plus, we will need some amount of time to showcase third-party titles coming to the system and probably highlight a few indie games as well. But even with all of that, I still think Nintendo will have room to show off a bunch of new titles that we've heard nothing about yet. So now, here's the fun part. I get to pass this question off to you guys. What would you like to see from Nintendo this year? It can be realistic or completely ridiculous. Whatever you want, I would love to hear your thoughts, so please leave them in the comments down below. Anyways, I think that's going to do it for this video, so if you enjoyed it, a like rating would be greatly appreciated. If you want to see more of my videos, consider subscribing. But once again, guys, my name is Matt. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.